So I realized I can't use this microphone and do VTube Studio stuff at the same time, so I'm going to be a real expensive PNG tuber until further notice. So let's screw it up. RIKK-TIKK-TIKK-TIKKI, Rudyard Kipling. This is the story of the great war that RIKK-TIKKI fought single-handedly through the bathrooms of a big bungalow. Darzi, the tailor bird, helped him. Chuchandra, the muskrat, who never comes out to the middle of the floor, but always creeps around by the wall, gave him advice. But RIKK-TIKKI did the real fighting. RIKK-TIKKI was a mongoose, his fur and his tail rather like a cat's, but his head and his habits quite like a weasel's. His eyes and the end of his restless nose were pink. He could scratch himself anywhere he pleased with any leg he chose to use, front or back. He could fluff up his tail till it looked like a brush. As he scuttled through the long grass, his war cry was RIKK-TIKK-TIKK-TIKK. One summer day, a flood washed him out of the burrow where he lived with his mother and father and carried him kicking and clucking down a roadside ditch. He found a little wisp of grass floating there and clung to it till he lost consciousness. When he revived, he was lying in the hot sun in the middle of a garden path, very wet, dirty, and tired indeed. A small boy was saying, "Here's a dead mongoose. Let's have a funeral." "No," said his mother. "Let's take him in and dry him. Perhaps he isn't really dead." They took him into the house, and a big man picked him up between his finger and thumb and said he was not dead at all, but half choked. They wrapped him in a blanket and warmed him over a small fire. He opened his eyes and sneezed. "Now," said the big man, "don't frighten it, and we'll see what he'll do." It is the hardest thing in the world to frighten a mongoose because he's eaten up with curiosity from his nose to his tail. The motto of all the mongoose family is run and find out, and RIKK-TIKKI was a true mongoose. He looked at the blanket, decided it was not good to eat, ran all around the table, sat up, smoothed his fur, scratched himself, and jumped on the small boy's shoulder. "Don't be frightened, Teddy," said his father. That's his way of making friends. "Ooh, he's tickling under my chin," said Teddy. RIKK-TIKKI looked down between the boy's collar and neck, sniffed at his ear, and climbed down to the floor, where he sat rubbing his nose. "Good gracious," said Teddy's mother. "That's a wild creature? I suppose he's been so tame because we've been kind to him." "All mongooses are like that," said her husband. "If Teddy doesn't pick him up by the tail or try to put him in a cage, he'll run in and out of the house all day long. Let's give him something to eat." They gave him a little piece of raw meat. RIKK-TIKKI liked it immensely. When it was finished, he went out onto the veranda, sat in the sunshine, and fluffed up his fur to make it dry to the roots. Then he felt better. "There are more things to find out about in this house than all my family could find out in all their lives," he said to himself. "I shall certainly stay and find out." He spent all that day roaming around the house. He nearly drowned himself in the bathtubs. He put his nose into the ink on a writing table and burned it on the end of a big man's cigar when he climbed into his lap to watch how writing was done. At nightfall, he ran into Teddy's nursery to watch how kerosene lamps were lighted, almost said turd. And when Teddy went to bed, RIKK-TIKKI climbed up there too. But he was a restless companion because he had to check out every noise all throughout the night to find out what made it. Teddy's mother and father came in the last thing in the evening to look at their boy, and RIKK-TIKKI was awake on the pillow. "I don't like that," said Teddy's mother. "He may bite the child." "He'll do no such thing," said the father. "Teddy's safer with that little beast than if he had a bloodhound to watch him. If a snake came into the nursery now..." But Teddy's mother wouldn't think of anything so awful. Early in the morning, RIKK-TIKKI came to breakfast on the veranda, riding on Teddy's shoulder. They gave him a banana and some boiled eggs, and he sat on all their laps one after the other, because a very well-brought-up mongoose always hopes to someday be a house mongoose and have rooms to run about in. RIKK-TIKKI's mother had carefully taught Rikki what to do if he ever got the chance to live in a house with people. Then RIKK-TIKKI went out into the garden to see what was to be seen. It was a large garden with bushes as big as houses, lime and orange trees, clumps of bamboo, and thickets of high grass. Rikki-Tikki licked his lips. "This is a splendid hunting ground," he said. His tail grew thick and bushy at the thought of it. He scuttled up and down the garden, sniffing here and there till he heard very sorrowful voices in the thorn bush. It was Darzee, the tailor bird, and his wife. They had made a beautiful nest by pulling 2 big leaves together, stitching them up the edges with fibers, and filling the hollow with cotton and downy fluff. The nest swayed to and fro as they sat on the rim and cried. "What's the matter?" asked Rikki-Tikki. "We are very miserable," said Darzee. "One of our babies fell out of the nest yesterday, and Nog ate him." Said Rikki-Tikki. "That is very sad. But I am a stranger here. Who is Nog?" Darzee and his wife cowered down in the nest without answering, for from the thick grass at the foot of the bush there came a low hiss, a horrid sound that made Rikki-Tikki jump back 2 feet. Then inch by inch out of the grass rose up the head and spread hood of Nog, the big black cobra. He was 5 feet long from tongue to tail. When he had lifted 1/3 of himself up, clear of the ground, he started swaying to and fro, exactly like a dandelion sways in the wind. He looked at Rikki-Tikki with the wicked eyes of a snake that never changed their expression, whatever the snake may be thinking. "What is Nog?" he said. "I am Nog. The great god Brahma put his mark upon all cobras when the first cobra spread his hood to keep the son off Brahma as he slept. Look and be afraid." He spread out his hood more than ever, and Rikki-Tikki saw a grand marking on the back of it. It looked exactly like the eye part of a hook and eye fastening. He was afraid for a minute, but it was impossible for a mongoose to stay frightened for any length of time. And though Rikki-Tikki had never met a live cobra before, his mother had fed him on dead ones. He knew that a grown mongoose's business in life was to fight and eat snakes. Nog knew that too. At the bottom of his cold heart, he was afraid. "Well," he said as his tail began to fluff up again, "marks or no marks, do you think it's right for you to eat baby birds out of a nest?" Nog was thinking to himself and watching the least little movement in the grass behind Rikki-Tikki. He knew that mongooses in the garden meant death, sooner or later, for him and his family. He wanted to get Rikki-Tikki off his guard, so he dropped his head a little, leaning it to one side. "Let us talk," he said. "You eat eggs? Why should I not eat birds?" "Behind you! Look behind you!" sang Darzee. Rikki-Tikki knew better than to waste time staring. He jumped up in the air as high as he could go, and just under him whizzed by the head of Naga-Ina, Nog's wicked wife. She had crept up behind him to kill him. He heard her savage hiss as her stroke missed, and he came down almost across her back. If he had been an older mongoose, he would have known that then was the time to break her back with one bite, but he was afraid of the terrible lashing return stroke of the cobra. He bit, indeed, but did not bite long enough, and as he jumped clear of her whisking tail, leaving Naga-Ina torn and angry. "Wicked, wicked Darzee," said Nog, reaching as high as he could towards the nest in the thorn bush. But Darzee had built it out of reach of snakes, and it only swayed to and fro.